I am trying to make an actual TV show.
It's so hard to find a funny show that isn't filthy. I watch them, but I don't want to.
Let's do this.
Fire, like lots of fire.
So dedicated.
So cool. Where's it go from there, you know?
Oh, have I got your attention now?
This is bigger than you can handle.
You got any plans for tonight?
But what are you waiting for? Let's go.
Cool? Absolutely!
Energy. How are we doing out there? There we go. Come on, we're going to talk costume design. We got to have some energy in this room. I'm Randy Kleiner. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SeriesFest, and truly welcome here. We couldn't do this without you, our audience. There would be no reason to do this, so appreciate you all taking your time to be here with us today. Thank you to the SeriesFest staff and volunteers. They are absolutely incredible, a small and mighty team that put this whole thing on. If you see them, especially as we go through the week and they start to do a little of this, you know, just pat them on the back and be sure to introduce yourselves and say hello. Buy them a drink, apparently, at night when they're off the clock. Okay, wow, I'm rowdy today, I guess. Thank you, a huge thank you to Denver Film. We're in their home, the C Film Center. Their staff becomes our staff, literally from the, give them a huge round of applause. From the projectionists, the theater managers, house staff, concessions, all of them. They truly make this happen and make this special for us and become part of our family, so thank you to Denver Film. And for today's special panel, thank you to champion pass holder Ellen Kleiner. That's my mother. Just went there for it. Okay, I'm so excited for this panel. Every season we talk about wanting to spotlight kind of below the line talent, and they are truly incredible talent. And this year we decided to shine a spotlight on costume designers, how they use costumes to tell stories, and the impact that it has on what you see on screen is truly amazing. And I couldn't be more proud of the costume designers and this panel that we have for you today. So I'm going to bring up our moderator, Stacy Lamb, the digital news editor of People, to bring up the panel. Thank you.
Hi. All right, thank you guys. I will go ahead and introduce our panel so we can get started. First up, we have Salvador Perez. He's worked on Never Have I Ever, Hocus Pocus 2, and the Mindy Project. Next up, we have Johnetta Boone, who has worked on Yellowstone and Greenleaf. Next up is Terry Dresbach, who has worked on Outlander and Rounders. And Lynn Paolo, who has worked on Queen Charlotte, Anna Delvey, and largely for Shondaland. It looks like we're all drinking beers, but these are waters, I assure you. Well, thank you guys for joining us today and doing this conversation. We're going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for questions toward the end. But to get us started, and I'm going to kind of toss this out to all of you, so whoever wants to jump in first, if you don't mind. What is like maybe the one or two biggest conceptions when it comes to your job and your role as a costume designer?
I think we can all just say the same. They think that we just shop for a living. Shopping is such a small part of my job.
That's absolutely correct. That's so correct.
And that about 75% of our job is design, whereas it's really about 25%, and the other 75, 50 to 75 is administration and running.
I think the other part of our jobs that people don't talk about is that you have to be a people manager. You're often handling, not just for the actors, of course,
we
but for the crews.
Psychology, just
Yeah.
producers, studio heads, actors,
Psychologists,
I
historians.
mean, I think for you, particularly on your big period pieces, you have hundreds of people working for you, I imagine. Yeah.
You also
And they're
have to
always
know how to
crying.
Manage your money.
Yeah, you got to be an accountant, a sociologist, a psychologist, a historian. What else?
And storytellers.
And you have to tell a story.
Well, clearly you definitely wear a lot of hats on set on any given production. And we were talking about this a little bit backstage, but the industry has also gone through a lot of changes over the years, especially with the pandemic and the strikes. How has your role largely changed, and is there any major thing that you've had to evolve or adapt to, especially in this kind of post-era that we're in now?
I think I'm going to start with this time. So I think that budgets are even tighter than they've ever been, which is quite tricky, and a lot of people aren't working, which is unfortunate right now.
I think the budgets is the biggest thing that's changed. Post-pandemic, the studios just want to spend less, and they expect us to do the exact same job we've done forever with less money, less time, and less people. So we've always been creative people, but they're really stretching us to perform in ways that we haven't before. And there's a slowdown. We had a pandemic where there was this feast or famine. There was so much work because everybody wanted content. And then it just sort of abruptly stopped. And then we had a writer's strike. And that shut the industry down for months and think, the strike's over. It's not. There's still the IATSEs and Teamsters are in the middle of negotiations. So there's still this very weird slowdown that's happening. So we're not back to...
They're calling it a contraction.
Yes. But I'm saying it's like, so those of us that are working feel very blessed because we're keeping our crews working and keeping busy creatively, but it's not back to normal yet.
And once there's a contraction, there's never an expansion. Yeah. Once it contracts for something like a strike or COVID, which is not an average thing, but it's not like afterwards everybody goes, okay, you can have your money now. You can have your team back. You can, no.
Which is what I was about to say, because that affects our teams as well. Yeah. Our budget not just affects our costumes, but they affect the size of the teams that we have. So if we expand it and we're able to bring in more people, which gives us the opportunity to really do our job without the pressures of some one person doing 3 jobs. Now we have to scale back to a smaller size team and accomplish the same tasks.
I'm used to having an assistant and a couple of shoppers because I don't shop, although you think I do. On this show I don't have a shopper or an assistant. Yeah. And it's like, it's just, they expect that same, and I have to be on set to establish every outfit, and I still have to be at the mall. So it's like, which one do you want me to do?
Yeah. Do you see any of this kind of contraction or budget limitations, anything like that, sparking any ingenuity in what you guys can do? Do you see like any sort of positive kind of growth from that, or is it?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, and the other thing that people sort of like, you don't think about this, when the pandemic shut the world down, the factory shut down. They stopped making fabric, they stopped making suits, they stopped making clothes. Right after the pandemic, we came back to work. You go to Hugo Boss, and there was 100 suits to buy, 30 colors, everything you wanted in the world was there. People stopped wearing suits. Hugo Boss stopped making suits. So I'm finding to do my job now, it's online because brick and mortar stores are going away. And I'm still trying to get, they give me, you would hope to get cast the day before. I'm literally getting cast at 6:30 at night when the stores are closed. And they want them to be on set the next morning at 5 a.m. And so it's that miracle work of getting clothes in that quickly.
And can I just say that when I was working on Queen Charlotte in England, we also had to deal with Brexit. So it was in the middle of COVID, it was in the middle of Brexit. So this is just a silly supply chain story and how it impacts our lives as costume designers. I went to France, to Paris to buy fabric. If I had shipped the fabric directly to London, it would have taken 3 months for me to get the fabric. So instead we shipped it to New York. And when we shipped it from New York, it came to London in 4 days. So those are the problem-solving things that you have to have your business head on and your creative head, because if you're not really thinking about your budgets and the crew and all the, how can I get this done quickly? So you've really got to be a problem solver.
And the other thing I'd add is that we never have a shortage of having to innovate, just by the nature of our job. Mm-hmm. We can be doing a show about aliens, and then we're doing a Western, and then we're doing a period piece, and then we're doing an office and a doctor, which is the joy of it. Yeah. It truly is. But there's so much innovation that's just built into it just through the very nature of the beast. We're not looking for more.
And inside of that innovation, you have to be creative.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to think outside of the box because what you have available is not what you need. So then you have to create it outside of what's available by applying embellishment or color or something to make it look different, because every navy blue suit looks the same, right? So in some cases, we have to do things differently in order to accomplish our goal, our task, and our own design inspirations and elements.
Well, going off of that and considering that you guys, you four all work on very different shows and very different genres, how do you say that you help create the characters that we see on screen? And Lynn, did you want to start with that?
I address every single show the same way. So for instance, I think I have a wide range so on Shameless, it's one version of a character, isn't it? And then on Queen Charlotte, it's a different world. But I think for all of us, and I think we'll all probably say the same things, it's all about the research. It's all about, communication with the producers, figuring it all out. And then you build, you start with your script, but you're just building a world is what you're doing, and you're building a character. So that's, for me, the joy of the job, because every new show is a completely different world. I learn so much when I'm starting a new show. That's one of the joys of it. So for me, that's my passion and joy. I think the research is my favorite part, actually.
Yes.
And I think we are fortunate to work with the same producers over and over again. I mean, I've worked with Mindy for 12 years. I know what she expects. Yes. I know her worlds are aspirational. There's a little bit of a cheat sheet, because I know that, yes, it's a high school, and what kids wear in high school is very different than what our kids are going to wear in high school, because it's an aspirational show. It's always going to be the heightened version of it. And I think that that's part of the storytelling process. It's like, you'll get a script, and the character will be like, oh, she's from a seaside city in LA, and her father was blah, blah, blah. And that's the information. And then it's up to us to flesh that out and take that sentence and have conversations with the showrunner and the creator, and then bring that character to life. Nuances of how their shoes are worn, the cut of a t-shirt, the fit of a blouse, all of those little tiny nuances that people don't, nothing goes on camera that we haven't thought about every single detail of it. Yes. And that's part of the costume design, that's storytelling.
I think that also a really important thing is that I always say that clothing's like a billboard, right? We have a few minutes when one of our characters, seconds, walks on the screen, and there's not like a, Chiron going underneath that says, and then she grew up here, and her father was this, and then they moved, and there was a trauma and a cyclone or whatever the hell it was, right? We have to create people that you can understand from whatever period, from whatever circumstance. You have to be able to go, oh, I believe that person. Yes. Oh, yeah, she looks like my school teacher. She looks like the woman at my bank. She looks like that page out of the history book. And we create that. The actors walk in the room. We're the first ones they meet. And together, we see them in there. And then we build a character. And that's who you see. It's an exciting process.
Yes, and I was actually just about to say that, because oftentimes, all the time, what happens is the actors walk in the door.
Who am I?
And they've never actually portrayed their characters before.
Yep.
And they have to believe what it is that we're presenting to them, so that it supports them with becoming that character. Without their costume, they may not be able to achieve that goal. Right.
And do you have that moment in the fitting when you watch their physicality shift and change, and they suddenly move differently, and you go, they just found it.
Yes.
They read the script and they can have conversations with the producers, but it's until they're in the fitting room with us in front of that mirror when it's the first time they see the character that we helped create.
And feel it. Yeah.
Well, considering that moment, I always love that aha moment when it kind of finally comes together. But before that, there's, I'm sure, a certain amount of research and work that kind of goes into pulling it all together. Do you bring any of that information to the actors when you are going through the costume design and setup? Do you kind of inform them what the purpose or choices are for?
I just do it in the fitting room, don't you?
Yeah,
I mean, you have to. I mean,
they have to be present in the room with you, and I sometimes show them the boards and what the producers and I have discussed, and then you go through it. But I always say I want to write a book that says in the fitting room, or the room, or something, because it's in there. And I think another misconception, just quickly, and I should have said it earlier, is that people assume that the actors are telling us it isn't that at all. It's a discussion. We're all creative people. We talk about it, and they bring great ideas, and then we give them our ideas, and it's a collaboration. That's what it's all about.
And something like, and I can go to a period piece. That's an easy thing to do. You don't expect that the actor has done, extensive research in what the military or the peasant would wear in Scotland in the 18th century, nor necessarily what the waitress in Brooklyn might actually wear in the 50s or the 60s. And they have to be able to count on that you've done that. That's your job. And you give them that.
Well, also in some cases, I had a show where it was a period show and the actress didn't want to wear the corset.
Oh my God.
And I said, well, you have to wear
Been
the
there.
corset. Well,
Done
Karen,
that.
you cheated. I said, no, there's no way to cheat what happens with your body when you put a corset on. You have to put the corset on. And she fought tooth and nail until finally she realized that she had to put the corset on, So there are those moments and times when we are in the fitting rooms and you're working with a period piece, or, in another instance where, the actor wants to wear something different from the character that as it's portrayed, but the character is also a living, breathing person. So all the research shows you who that character was. And then their family is still very much alive. So I had one actor say, well, I want to be cooler than that. And I said, well, but he was a vacuum cleaner salesman. He was not cool.
Yeah, that's a lot of that.
Oh my gosh, it was days in the fitting room.
We will have conversations with the producer and the writer for weeks before the actor gets
there.
On the Mindy project, Niecy Nash played a character. She was a lesbian, chief of surgery, and the note from Mindy is that she's granola, she's corduroy skirts and heavy tights and flat shoes. And Niecy Nash walked into
Said, I don't think so.
In a t-shirt with rhinestone queen across her breast, pink satin pants, and stilettos. And I'm like, so, I said, Mindy has ideas about the character. Have you thought about it? She's like, well, this. And I'm like, oh, no, girl.
Yeah.
And so then you have to put her in a tweed skirt with,
with a t-shirt that says clean across the top.
But it's always funny when, because a lot of times, especially, no offense to anybody, but the younger generation of actors don't want to be characters. They want to be celebrities.
Yes.
And it's like, I know, okay, I almost did a name. I know you in real life drive a Maserati and your dad's rich, but you're playing this, you work in a kitchen. You make $15 an hour. You don't have Amiri tennis shoes. It doesn't work that way. And so it's our job to sort of manipulate them into the character.
Oh my God, the manipulation, the coaching.
It is a great collaboration.
It is.
Actors love what we bring because we give them the nuances and we help their performances because we tell them you're wearing a corset, so you're going to walk this way, or you can't wear a heel, and their actors are insecure.
And I think 99% of the time they get there and they go, oh, thank you. This is, I know who I am now. Thank you. This is, there is that moment always in the room where they go, like you said, their posture changes, or they turn to you and go, this is her.
One thing you were saying about working with younger actors, I did a movie that was set in the 80s, and it was when skinny jeans and really low pants were the thing. And trying to get those girls into pants mom jeans was like they were crying. They were like, what? I can't think when I'm wearing this. And it's funny. It's a great story to tell, but they couldn't. Yeah. They were so distracted by their clothing that it was going to mess with their performance. So part of your job too is to actually not just completely dismiss what they're saying, and to be able to hear it and to be able to try to figure out, how can I cheat this? How can we
I had a similar thing with Kerry Washington on Little Fires Everywhere, and she won't mind me telling you the story, but it was the 1991, and it was the mom jeans.
Yes.
And Kerry was like, I'm doing it. Yeah. I'm fully invested. I'm wearing them. And we put them on her, and I took the pictures, and I said, and I'm like, hey, look at this. And she goes, oh God, no, I can't do it. And so we nuanced that one. But it's that thing where it's that do-si-do back and forth.
You do.
We don't torture an actor.
No.
You have to know which battles to fight. Sometimes
Some we do.
Okay, you're going to get the jeans. You're going to get the t-shirt.
Yeah.
You have to give them something so that they feel they want, even though we really want. Right.
Yes.
But it sounds like maybe some advice for young actors or newer actors is really to embrace the costume designer.
Yes.
And really help them kind of discover that
Well,
world.
we're there to help
trust
them,
us
to
for that
trust
to
us.
happen.
It's trust.
We're not
Yes.
there to make you miserable.
Yes.
And
Sal, you mentioned something about the Mindy project and working with Niecy Nash and on one of the shows, but I was just kind of thought about the idea of like a contemporary characters closet, and how do you balance? And I think kind of when we're talking about budget as well, how do you balance something versus like items that would be practical for a character versus something that's like designer or brand?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of a force, and a lot of times an actor will say to me, I would never wear that. I'm like, I'm not asking you to. The character's wearing it. Susan Sullivan on Castle was this very sort of Beverly Hills diva. Susan Sullivan wears beige and, loves a twin set. On Castle, she played this sort of ex-Broadway star who was wearing leopard and rhinestones. And can you hear me now? Oh.
Can you hear me now?
And she just like didn't understand all the sequin and sparkle and leopard. And then like at a certain point, she's like, oh, and then the best day was when I put her in a leopard blouse. She's like, can you get me one for myself? I broke her. But it's like, I'm not asking you to buy it or paying you to wear it.
Yes, absolutely.
it's a hard line.
That's absolutely right.
And then Johnetta and Terry, I wanted to ask about being on shows like Yellowstone and Outlander. Something more action oriented, something.
Sal.
Was that me? Sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. On a show that's more outdoors, more action oriented, how do you adapt the costumes to that? Is there much more intricacy in that?
There is, yes, considerably so, because we have to. Thank you. We have to have costumes that have wearability. In addition to that, they have to be comfortable and they have to be rigid. So it's a fine line that we have to dance in order for everything to work. A lot of times, just as what Sal was sharing, cowboys wear their jeans on their waist, for instance, and everyone wants to wear their jeans low. Well, you can't wear your jeans low because you wouldn't be able to be on a horse if your jeans were that low. There's other nuances, like cowboys wear their jeans 4 inches too long. So when the actors are putting their jeans on, they're saying these are too long, and I'll say no, because when you get on a horse, that you don't want to be able to see, the top of your boot. So there are all those things that you have to educate the actors with, because they're not actors. I mean, they're not cowboys, they're actors. Mm-hmm. And you find that you have that a little bit of a challenge with, depending on what shows you're doing and all the kinds of shows that you're doing, and what comes into place functionally so and what is stylistically so.
On Outlander, we were shooting in Scotland in the middle of the night in the rain, and I had to kind of go with the fact that, well, this is kind of what Highlanders did. So, how do I find ways to keep my actors comfortable, using what I've got? And that's tricky. As for actions, but you can do it. That's kind of easy because you can cheat a lot of things to keep people warm and dry. The trickier thing is all the action stuff. Yes. So and again, this also goes back to that the people we work for very frequently don't understand what it is that we do. So by season 4 on Outlander, I know it seems crazy, doesn't it? You'd think. I always used to say that, the Ford Motor Company knows, the guy who runs it knows there's a steering wheel in a car. Right. Why don't, okay. But by season 4 on Outlander, at the beginning of the season, I was like, I'm building 6, because every costume, you're not renting them, you're not buying them, you're making them. We built 6 of every single costume that the actor was wearing, and we were producing between 25 and 50,000 garments a season. So it was a big undertaking, but you don't always know what the scripts are in season 8 is going to be. In episode 8. So you don't have the time to suddenly build a dozen 18th century gowns. You'd better build them up front. But then you have to convince the people you work for why that's a pragmatic thing to do, and start, once again, the accountant hat goes on, why it's going to cost them 20 times as much if we have to build all those costumes later rather than we have them in the trailer now. It's that kind of it's like being in the military sometimes, the amount of planning that you have to do.
That's things like you'll do, whether a TV show or a film, and the costume goes through 8 stages. And I just did, last summer I did a movie called Brightheart with Rebel Wilson. She has one bride, takes place at a wedding. And I wanted 20 dresses because I figured I could, if I then mapped it out for 20 dresses, and I could only get 16 because, it's middle of summer and I found the 16 dresses. Of course, they shot the end where she falls in cake and has an explosion before we shot the beginning where it's pristine. So I went through like 7 dresses the first day, and I had like 8 because we were making them as we were going along. You never have enough. Like no matter when you plan for 8, you're going to use 9. So that goes back into the part of planning our job. We're not just designing the outfit, we're not just servicing the actor, but we're planning for production. We have to be production friendly. How do we do our job so that production can actually move along?
And then Lynn, I wanted to specifically ask about Queen Charlotte, if you don't mind. On a show like that, and I guess maybe Bridgerton as well, the hair and makeup, and especially the wigs, really have become such a part of the character's look. When you're designing costumes, how much are you working with the hair and makeup team to make sure it all coordinates? Like, did you ever see a wig and go, oh, we have to really kind of, modify?
I think on both of our shows, yes. So I think we were talking about this earlier in the tent. I think it's imperative to have an amazing open communication with the team in the hair and makeup department, especially on Queen Charlotte, for me, the wigs, because everything that was put into any wig was created by the costume department.
Yeah,
so we're providing them with the tools and the adornments that they need that have to exactly match the gown or the wedding gown, or even on some of the men, the dancers. Yeah. So, I mean, you did that too on your show too. You had to, don't you?
And you're doing it with the prop department as well. Exactly. Because, there's technically, this is like the microphone that we pass around that just, it's fine. I'm loud, I think. But, technically, weirdly, jewelry and watches are props, and yet the actor wears them, and so you always have to have that conversation with the prop master.
Yeah, I always do the jewelry.
I always do it. I'm like, oh no, let me.
I don't let props do the. Don't let props do the jewelry.
It's like some guy who's like, I don't know, and he's actually, when you first meet them, you go, and by the way, I'll be doing all the jewelry, and he goes, oh thank God.
They always say, oh thank you, good.
And purses and bags.
I mean, on the Mindy project, she never repeated an outfit. 30 outfits in an episode for 116 episodes, and she had the same rolly luggage for 6 seasons. And I'm like, Mindy, can we get you? Can we please? No, I mean, you change your shoes, like but can you? But that's props. They don't think of it in the same way we do. And that's not all of them across the board. There are some that are great. But I think our job is I need to talk to the production designer to make sure that I'm not putting a red dress on a red sofa. I need to talk to the prop people to make sure that that we and it's a lot of communication, and I text constantly. Like if I have a fitting photo that's approved, I send it to production designer, I send it to my prop people, I send it to hair and makeup.
And I want to see every fabric for every piece of furniture and curtain.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, how many times have you walked on the set?
On Outlander, I literally walked on the set. I had my actress in a blue floral gown, and the production designer had changed the couch. She was my best friend.
Oh my God, happened to me on Queen Charlotte.
Couch, and I'm like, I may have to kill you. I'll never speak to you again. And he's been my best friend for 30 years, and I'm like, it's over.
I have exactly the same story. I walked in, and it was turquoise, and we had her in a turquoise gown, and I was like, no. Yeah. But then we used it, and we ended up putting her in it, so it all blended in the end.
Sometimes that works.
But when that does happen, I mean, how fast and how quickly are you? I mean, you have to change that in an instant, right?
You can't change it.
Okay.
You can't change. Certainly not in a period piece. Mm-hmm. Maybe if you're in a contemporary, you can do a switcheroo. But things are so carefully planned out. Yes.
It takes how long? It took.
But also
5 weeks to make one of those gowns, so you can't just flip a switch.
But even in a contemporary piece, you've planned out the entire episode as a patchwork, as a puzzle. It's like this outfit's in this scene, and this one's in this one, and this one. You pull that thread out.
It's a house of cards.
Anything can happen.
And sometimes it's like, it's just pajamas. Like, I bought those pajamas, but then I completely recut them, had them fit to her. I can't just pull another pair. Like, there was an issue on Never Have I Ever where There was a blanket on the, there was a bedspread on the bed that matched the pajamas she's wearing. I'm like, change the bedspread. The bed doesn't have an opinion.
And when you have scenes with lots of actors, you're carefully determining the palette because you've got 12 people in the scene at one time, and that one, you can't change one color because then you have multiple people matching each other. It's so much easier for them to change the element in the room.
When you guys are watching a show and you see two characters wearing the exact same color talking to each other, the costume designer did not do that.
Right.
That's like one of those things that happens when you're not there and somebody makes they make somebody change something.
They make a decision.
Yeah, they make a decision without
or
you.
worse than that is now that they can color time things, and it's digital. You have somebody in purple and somebody in teal, but they've color timed it so they're both in 100 green. You're like, what the?
Yeah, what happened there?
With all that said, have you ever gotten a script where you just go, oh, I don't even know how we're going to make this happen?
Yes.
And then you
Every single
but you did make it work?
And then we do.
Yes.
Well, you do, and then sometimes, but you always have to know, most of the time you do, because that's your job. It's a collaborative medium. You've got to achieve the impossible every single day. The aliens have got to, whatever.
I feel like I'm never going to be able to do any of the shows. When you read the first episode, you
the
go,
worst.
oh God, oh God, oh
Right,
God.
I know, and I can't.
I mean,
can't do
this
it.
is the.
But the thing is that you also have to be able to be honest.
Yes.
And to be able to say, but this, it's my job to tell you that we're not going to be able to do this, or we're going to have to make some adjustments, or we're going to have to. It's my responsibility. They've hired me for my expertise. I have to also be able to communicate to them what can't happen.
And what's really great is when you have, like you're going to listen to Tom Verica later, he's coming to talk, is when you work with someone for a long time and you're with a producer for a long time, then you pick up that phone and say, this isn't going to happen, what can we do? And then they're like, okay, and it's they start problem solving for
And if
you and you have
tell
this
them-
great moment of like, it's so
And
creative.
if you don't give them that information, they don't have the opportunity to fix it either.
That's right.
Sal, I stopped you.
I was just gonna say, every show, and I didn't talk about this for the longest time, I would have that week of panic, like I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna get fired, I'm not gonna accomplish it, and now I sort of anticipate that, and I know that it's gonna come, and I'm gonna get it done. If they give us 3 days, 3 months, 3 years, we still get it done. But I think that little tiny bit of fear that you're gonna fail keeps us going. And that's just the reality. It's like they give us an impossible task, and we are miracle workers. We pull it off on time, on budget. I mean, how many of us have really held camera? Within I didn't say that we were, but I'm saying it's like it's somehow we miraculously accomplish it, and we've miraculously accomplished it for many years. But I think that there is a panic. There's a day, a week, a moment of panic because they're giving us some impossible tasks. But I think every script you get, because it's like one of in everything, my entire career, productions or writers like to say, you walk into the wall and there's a wall of all the places they've been on vacation for 30 years. So to the art department, that's 20 frames. They can go get that at Aaron Brothers. But to me, that's 3 people per picture, 20 outfits. That's 60 outfits, and they don't. Of course, they don't budget for that. I'm like,
It's
not
just a picture. Why would you have to budget
you
for
still
it?
have to So those things that writers like to write and art department likes to request. But they don't understand, it's nothing for them, and to us, it's a monumental task.
It's like a whole nother episode, isn't it? It's like a whole nother show.
And the thing is that every show is a new show and a new adventure. That moment of panic that you get is because you've never done that show before. And after you've been doing it for a few decades, you can go, you've done this.
I put out that fire
You'll
before.
do it again. You've put out all these fires. You're going to do it again. But man, that feeling never goes away.
But it's also because we're creating from scratch.
Yeah.
There's nothing in
Blank
existence
a piece of paper.
It's a blank canvas that we have to put the colors on, and sometimes you've got to mix the colors because the colors don't exist.
Yep.
And that's probably the greatest challenge of everything.
Yeah.
Well, the beauty of working in LA sometimes is that those colors live in rental houses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've been able to go back and wait. I made gold dancer costumes for Drumline. Where are they? And you got to go back to your own archives.
To that point, when I started Outlander, they gave us 7 weeks of prep, which I said I won't even touch the show for under 4 months. No way. But my husband was a showrunner, and know, he got to me. But I assumed, I'd never shot in the UK before, that when I got there, I was going to have all
Everything
these
available.
rental costumes.
Yes.
And after 2 weeks, the cold, hard truth came on me that I was going to have to make. And we were in Scotland. We weren't in London. We were in Scotland. There's no rental houses there. There is one now. We made it. But you know, there was this show that covers 5 periods, at least, and we were gonna have to make every damn garment. Damn is not the word I used at the time. and it was terrifying, but we did it. We did it, and it was a learning curve. It was almost like being in the business for the first time again. It was crazy, but you do it. You got to do it. You got to invent the colors. It's a great way to do it.
I'm
I
not
think
sure
that
if
as costume designers, we're constantly learning. Like, I am not the costume designer today I was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you happen to know the numbers or anything, but for Outlander, how big is your team? How many people do you have working and designing these costumes?
Well, I'm gone. It almost took me down after 6 years. We started out in a little tiny room with like one sewing machine. I'm like, I don't think it's gonna make it. We ended up with over 100 people, not including set. It was massive. We had like a football field of costumes by the time it was all over, and that's what you had to do, and they didn't, and nobody knew it. I remember this was a little. I think you'll understand the story. We first started out, and there's this warehouse, and I'm like, okay, we got to get racks built. I need Western costume in here. I need racks that go up to the ceiling and the length of this place, triple height. And the British producer goes, "What are you talking about? You'll use rolling racks." And I'm like, "Not on this show, we won't. We're gonna have way too many costumes." And he goes, "You know, we do this all the time." And I said, "I'm sorry, this is not a British show. This is an American show, and we do things big." So, this is supersized me. But by the end, we had 3 of those warehouses, and it's
I have
just
to
crazy.
say it was tricky when I went back there.
Wasn't it?
For Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte, because they do things differently.
Really differently.
And we do things the way we do
And
them.
The
you're the
hanger
American.
situation. Oh my God.
And
Hangers and
we-
safety pins don't
Yes.
exist in
Oh,
London.
I ship them in from here.
Yeah.
But I ended up with 230 people
Yes.
working on
Yeah.
Queen Charlotte, just on
Yeah.
Queen Charlotte, because I think what people don't understand is we were making the jewelry, we were
Yeah,
making
you're making
the
the jewelry,
corsets,
making
we
the
were making the
shoes.
shoes, we were
Yeah.
clocking the hosiery. I mean, every tiny little thing that you see was manufactured. None of it was rented. And none of it was, we didn't go down to I did go to the markets a lot and buy
Yeah.
little old pins and break
Things
them
to
up.
make it up, yeah.
But yeah, it's every tiny little thing is made, and you need hundreds of people to accomplish that.
Which I think is the really good point that we just sort of keep coming back to in this conversation, is that a huge part of our job is educating every single show, the people we work for and the people we work with, what it is we do for a living. It's over and over and over and over.
Even
and
whether
over
it's
again.
contemporary period, it's like
It doesn't matter.
I did 4
Yeah.
weddings and a funeral in London, and they gave me the entire cafeteria of this old factory. And I remember walking in there like, oh, this is so much space. And within 10 episodes, I had
Yeah.
filled it to capacity.
Exactly.
Because we had 4 weddings and a funeral. So it's like there was just, there was 300 people at the first wedding, so I had to get clothes for 300.
The bridesmaids alone.
But it's daunting. Like every time I start a show and I'm in an empty space, knowing that I'm gonna fill that up. I mean, even because you're still like on the show I'm on now. It's about a family who runs a basketball team. Every character needs a closet, and you cannot buy a closet in one day. You just the amount of clothes that come in on the Mindy project. We brought in $100,000 of clothes every week, and then we kept $40,000 of it. But that means you have to process $100,000 of clothes, and they came in, we fit them, and they had to get returned. The amount of labor just moving around to get the clothes is several full-time jobs.
And there's the moment at the beginning of every show when you're explaining to the producer why you need a telephone. Right. We need phones and lights.
And Wi-Fi.
And Wi-Fi and tables.
I mean, we have 6,000 square feet of product for Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Wow.
And people would
That's a
never,
massive
I mean,
show.
It's a massive show, because every actor has a stunt double and a photo double, and they also wear the same clothes, because Taylor says cowboys have 5 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans, but you really have more than 5 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans, but it looks like it. And so it's just massive rows of jeans and Western shirts and boots and hats.
In various stages
In
of distress.
Various stages of distress, exactly.
And in various sizes, because the stunt guy's never the right size.
Exactly.
And 1 week you have one Bob, the next week you have Darren, and Darren's
That's
feet
right.
are big, you know.
I mean, we had an actor who was a young boy, and he wears a size 29 jean, and his stunt double was 6'5", and he wore a 36, 37 jean, and he was in period jeans, and it's just, how do you figure that out? Well, we had to figure it out, you know, and there's some elements with period clothing that you then have to take the pockets off and put new stitching on so that it matches, or you have to change, you have to re-dye the jean so that the denims match. I mean, it's so dynamic. And so, I mean, every fine detail matters. Every fine detail matters. Right down to the crinolines and the corsets and the shoes and the basketball uniforms. And no one understands how dynamic every element is, right down to the color of the thread. And it's because on camera, you'll see the difference.
Yeah.
You'll see the difference.
You know, this is a panel of storytelling about
Yes.
storytelling. You know, but it's like I did a show with Kurt Russell called Breakdown many moons ago, and it happens in a 24-hour period. But the guy gets shot, dragged through a glass window, swims, you know, across who knows how many, the mud. Every possible thing happened in this 24-hour period. And I was like, well, we're going to need 48 of that shirt and 72 pairs of pants. And the producer's like, why? There's only one outfit the whole time. And you're like, okay, here we go again.
And we've all had that conversation with the producer.
We've all had it a million times.
It takes place in a day.
Yeah.
Well, considering how much work goes into everything you do, I have to imagine there's a sense of pride when it's all said and done. And I was just curious, when you look back at some of your work, if there is a standout moment when you see it all together on screen where you go, you know, that, like, you just feel it and you feel like it all came together in the way you hoped, wanted, or fought for. Maybe if you can go down the line, Sal.
I mean, I think you do that on almost every single show. I mean, you know, one of my current films was Hocus Pocus 2. And it took us 6 months from the inception of the outfits to getting them on camera, because we had a long prep, and we had the fabric made, and then we had it dyed, and then we had it silk screened, then we had it embroidered, and then we had it's like that day when they're all on set after 6 months of this, and they walk in on set, and everybody's beaming, and you're just like, you know, it's that sense of accomplishment, because it's a monumental task. And I think that almost on every show, especially at the end of it when you've just finished 10 episodes and you're like, wow, they all look great, nobody was naked. You know, I think that it's just, we work so hard, and that sense of accomplishment is something that we have to feel.
For sure, yeah. The especially for us in the Yellowstone world, we have so many stunt doubles and so many photo doubles, and it feels incredibly accomplishing when you look at the doubles and they look exactly like the actor or the character, and you know that when they walked in that day, you didn't have anything that fit them. Nothing at all. And
one's a redhead, one's a blonde.
One's a redhead and one's a blonde. And then you just go in and you work through all those details to get it to match exactly right. And that's, you know, a huge accomplishment for us.
Can I swear in mine?
Yeah.
So, a set is a very, very, very busy place. And there's a lot going on. There's lights and there's people and there's stuff happening, and actors are doing their lines and makeup people are doing their thing. And you have been working on whatever that gown, that suit, that costume, contemporary period, whatever. And you know it's brilliant. And it walks out there onto that set. And everybody else is too busy, and they're not really trying to blow it up. They're not trying to tell you all the time how brilliant you are. And I'm very famous for standing in the middle of the set when one of those things goes out, and I go, I'm a fucking genius.
Yes.
And anybody around me goes, oh, there she goes again. But it's like, you know what? I am, and we are. And that's what we're all saying, right? You know, come on, genius.
I think for me, I am very critical of my work. But the thing that brings me so much joy in what we do is, well, obviously watching the finished project, but whatever. But just a little example was that on Scandal, by the end of the second season, the grips, you know, Kerry would walk on the set or someone, and the grips would be like, "Is it Prada?" You know, and you're just like, "Oh, I'm educating all the guys on the set." It's so funny. They were loving and embracing the whole thing. And then I think on Queen Charlotte, just all the weddings. Every time you walk out there, and you have all the dancers, and you know, it's so difficult to fit dancers in whatever world, but. When you see it all together, and I think you were probably the same as I was. We were shooting at all these historic homes, and you walk in, and it's it just feels like you step back in time, and you think, "Wow, I made this." You know, it's that great feeling, isn't it?
And it never goes away. No. It never goes away. I'm iffy about watching my work. I have a really hard time with it. I don't have to. I know what I did.
I remember when I did Princess Switch 2 and building the coronation. It was just, and we were filming in a castle that you can't even visit as a visitor. Like they're locations that we get the privilege of visiting that no one from the outside public world is allowed to go into. And we were in Scotland as well. And I look around, and the staircase is made out of sterling silver, and there's Rodins, and the ceiling's alabaster. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And then building the coronation, we had to build the coronation gown there. And it was just beautiful doing the research and resourcing the trims, and they're metal and not plastic or nylon. It's just absolutely, and when you work in England, or in Europe, it's amazing. It's so incredible.
If I can, you know, we were backstage all together, and you get a bunch of costume designers together, and it's like, you know, but we'd all get to a point where one or the other of this panel here would go, but damn, it's fabulous, right? We all truly love what our work is, even though it's a damn painful experience, and it's really hard.
I wouldn't do anything else. I mean, it's beautiful torture.
And then another question I had for everyone, if you don't mind, this is more of a TV kind of geeky fandom question, just as someone who watches so much TV. Have you ever incorporated any sort of Easter eggs or hidden details into your costume design, whether or not fans notice, and kind of, do you have like one or two that stand out for you in that sense?
I did so many. Yeah. I think on the West Wing, we did tons on the West Wing. You know, we'd always have like a little cufflink or something on someone's tie. And on Queen Charlotte, we had the Stars and Moon Ball, so everything was stars and moons. I always hide something. Even on Shameless, we had little ones. So yeah, I think everyone does that. Do you do it?
Yes.
I mean, like, I've been working with Rebel Wilson for 12 years. We did three Pitch Perfect movies. I did senior year with her. I always put Rebel in a shirt with a heart on it. It just happened to, organically on the first two Pitch Perfects, and then it just became our thing.
Yes. On Outlander, because it is a book series, and because it's about time travel, I felt like part of my job was hints. Like, this character time traveled from the 60s, so she's carrying some of that sensibility with her. I'm going to give you clues. Yes. There were a lot of people who didn't read the books, and they were irate about some of the things I was doing with the costumes. Like, people didn't wear that then, and then they'd wait, and then 7 episodes later they'd find out, oh, she was from the 60s, and it was like, oh.
Yeah.
but yeah, those kind of Easter eggs were kind of had to be part of the story.
Well,
it's
whenever
fun.
we have flashbacks, I try to absolutely implant or hide in some element from the previous era of the family intertwined with someone from the most present generation.
We do that. We have people, people wearing dead relatives' clothing and stuff.
Yes.
I did that a lot in Outlander.
And then for all of you, how do you feel, or what do you think when you see fans really admiring and enjoying the costumes, but then also recreating them, and trying to bring them to life themselves?
Well, partially, I would like to get away from the Halloween costumes, right?
So those are different.
I'm not opposed to Halloween, but some of the elements, the things that we do, people can actually wear. They do wear them in real life as well. They wear them a lot during Halloween, but it's nice, people do Bridgerton balls, for instance, where they dress, and they mimic what Mindy is wearing, or but they don't have to do it as a costume, because our characters are not wearing it as a costume. They're wearing it as part of their actual journey in life.
I think it's like Mindy had all these particular. I was all about mixing the prints and layering, and I remember walking into Nordstrom's and they took a dress and put it over a long sleeve blouse. I'm like, where's my check?
Right.
Where's my check? Because
That's
it's
a
like
whole different
people think that we follow fashion. We dictate fashion.
Yeah,
Fashion
absolutely.
follows us. And I think I love when the fans try to do that. But little things, like I remember I did this show called Party Down. And we put them on in their little pink bow ties. And I remember being in West Hollywood, in some ridiculous costume, and walked by us as a 8 people in tuxedo shirts with pink bow ties. 90% of the public had no, and I'm like, oh my God, Party Down. But it's like, it's just great that something that we did just as a fluke has resonated with the public, and they want to emulate it. That's cake on cake.
Yes, that's great.
I learned, it was really interesting when I first started, we came onto a show on Outlander again that had this built-in fan base, huge fan base. And I was a little bit like, I hadn't dealt with that world before. It was like, whoa. But my husband, who comes from the world of Star Trek and science fiction and all that stuff, was like, no, it's the part you're missing. Fandom is love. And it took me, that it was such a powerful statement, I didn't really think about it for a long time. But then I started going to like fan conventions, and there would be, because the Outlander fan base tends to be older women, and there would be these women, and they would have made these copies of the red dress that's outside, or the wedding dress, and there was the love in it, and they were so proud, and they were not, our lead actress. They were a 72-year-old woman, but it was such a, to this day, it is the most touching, wonderful, amazing thing that to see something that was in your head at one time. First of all, to see something that was in your head at one time, get up and walk around in real life is always a fabulous moment. But then to see it get reinterpreted over and over again by other people, it's very different than seeing it in a store. That pisses me off too. But it's an amazing, loving.
I had two experiences that year. Well, so at the premiere of Queen Charlotte, it was fabulous. We showed up, and all these people had bought tickets, and we all looked around, and everyone was dressed. There were crowns and gowns, and they'd made them and created them. Yeah. But the other thing I want to say is, with Scandal, we had a great intersection with fashion, and like you, Sal, all of a sudden I was seeing capes everywhere. And everyone was wearing white, and every time I would go to the store, all of a sudden all the coats were white. And then I actually had fashion designers calling me saying, oh, this is what we've done. And I think that is something that people undervalue when it comes to television, because it was always, the red carpet was always about film. But television reaches way more people.
And with the advent of social media, fans, like, before they tried to figure out what fabric to use, now they're like, Sal, what was the fabric on that cape? But I remember back to Veronica Mars, which was, 20 years ago. My God, I can't be that old. But it was 20 years ago, and I remember, this is, everybody has social media now, but then they didn't. And one of my PAs, which I always learn from my PAs, because kids know everything. Yep. She's like, Sal, there's a blog on the internet that shows when you reuse clothes, because a lot of costume designers will not reuse clothes on television shows. Yeah. I mean, my friend Kate Adair designed Desperate Housewives and never repeated a sweater. My philosophy is that this Veronica Mars didn't have a lot of money, so she had a few great pieces, and I wanted to reuse them over and over again. Somebody created a blog that tracked when I reused the pieces, and she showed it to me, and it was fascinating to me that the things that I did nuance-wise, that I was just, I was within the department, like, oh, well, she's gonna stop wearing the necklace, it's over, and that they tracked it, but it really opened my eyes to things that we do with the tiniest, no thought of it all, the audience takes it to a whole other level. So the fandom is really powerful.
I had that experience on Shameless because of Mickey Milkovich. So Mickey and Ian had this love affair, this amazing love affair, and there's a huge fandom, about Galovich and Mickey Milkovich. So we had a T-shirt that was very similar to one that Mickey had worn It wasn't the same shirt on an extra. And we got so much mail. People were so upset that this extra was wearing Mickey's shirt. And I'm thinking, you're watching it that closely? Good for you.
Well, it's so interesting because you'll be in meetings with producers or directors and they'll go, oh, nobody will see that.
Yeah.
Oh, nobody will notice that. And you're like, oh, yes,
Well,
they
especially
will.
now with
What do you
digital
think they're
television, you
watching?
can stop it and replay and close up and it's.
And they're watching the actors, and they're looking at. I mean, you think they don't notice the clothes? Really?
Well, the thing is now with this whole Western explosion.
Oh my God.
Because of Yellowstone, it's incredible to see.
I was gonna say,
It's incredible to see how everyone is embracing. Listen, this isn't the first time that the Western trend has been at the forefront of fashion. This has happened for decades in the past, but this time it's at a whole nother level. And it is because people fell in love with Beth and Britt. They did.
Yes, they did.
It's not just Western, it's how you did Western
how
that resonated.
you did it
Had anybody else done it boring, they wouldn't have cared,
I'm
but
sorry,
you
it's
made
that
it
silver dress
special.
at the
So
end.
please don't act like it's just Western.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think this is a good point to transition over to the audience and open up for questions if we have any. I don't know how we want to do this. Is there someone with a mic, or we just raising hands?
One that doesn't work.
Okay. I saw you just right first.
So this is primarily for Terry, but anybody else who has worked on taking something from a book to life. Did you find, especially with a show like Outlander and a fan following like Outlander and a book that had been around for quite some time, did you find it difficult to bring any of those things that somebody had created in their mind without having to put them into practice?
We'll have to do a whole other panel on that. It's really tough. It's really tough. I had read the books. The reason the show got made was because I hammered my husband over the head till he had to make the show. And I knew what those moments were. And I also knew which ones wouldn't work and which ones would. And I also knew that there was going to be an incredible expectation around each one of those. Things like the wedding dress, that ended up being let's go to the red dress that's outside. People hated that dress. They absolutely hated the dress because it was not to the letter, the exact, take the words on the page, now go in, and it's not a Bible, it's a blueprint. Well, I think that dress was damn near down her belly button, but it's, a book is a blueprint, not a Bible. And so you have
basically
to,
your script.
It's kind of a
But I say the same thing with the script. That like she walked in a LeMay gown.
Exactly.
You don't even know what LeMay is.
Or he reached out and touched her, and her gown fell to the floor, and you're like, she's got a corset, she's got hoops. I finally, in the writer's office, sent in a mannequin that had a corset and hoops and everything on it, and went, next time you think you're just gonna drop the clothes on the floor, I want you guys to go over that mannequin and try it. But you have to. But there, there was a moment where I think the writers weren't gonna do the red dress, and I said to my husband, no. You have to see. Look at your face. You have to do that dress. You have to, and it's and people get pissed off along the way.
You have to respect your fan base.
You have to respect your fan base, and you have to know those moments, and you have to give them what they're looking for. But at the same time, you can't be a slave to it. And it's an interesting thing. And I think I was really lucky because I was a fan of the books, and I'd read them like 35 times. So that was a definite advantage. I wouldn't have wanted to come in cold on that. I'll tell you.
Well, especially if you didn't understand the significance of those moments.
Yeah.
Like the dress that she's wearing when she travels through time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I got so much heat for that suit that because the author had described this costume, and I'm like, why would somebody who had already been through time, go back not with that knowledge? You'd go back and you'd be armed.
Yes.
You'd be like, it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet, I need lots of pockets, and people lost their minds because I hadn't stayed to the letter of it. I'll stand by that costume, though, because I think it made sense.
And then we have another question in the yellow.
So I'm an obsessive credit reader, and I want to tell you,
Bravo!
you guys are the first credit I look for because I believe in the power of
You should
passion.
be in the front all the time.
I'm just so happy you're here.
Thank you.
I can't tell you. And
thank
I'm
you.
So happy that you're sharing your stories. But I want to kind of know, just briefly, each of your kind of slight backgrounds. Did you start as a fashion designer?
I had no intention of doing this for a living. I wanted to be an educator. And then I moved from England to Los Angeles and suddenly realized I'd have to go back to school after I'd just taken a 6-year degree in child psychology and education. And they wanted me to do a 3-month course to become a teacher. And I had no money. I arrived with 1 suitcase, typical immigrant story, and ended up meeting people from England who were doing music videos, friends of friends, and I started as doing craft service, being a PA, being an assistant, worked my way up, was an assistant to stylist, became a stylist, worked on the set, worked my way up, became a supervisor. From a supervisor, became a costume designer, so it was a long road.
I also had absolutely no intention of doing it. And I went to art school. I was going to be an artist. But I also had the care of an elderly parent, and I needed to make a living. I get a little choked up when I tell this. I needed to make a living, and I didn't want to go work in a bank. And a film came. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and a film came to town, and they needed somebody to drive the film to the airport.
I did that too.
Did you do that too? I also did craft service.
I did craft
and I was like, I could do this. I could do this. I could drive film to the airport for $600 a week in a rental car. Sure. It felt like a world that didn't have. If you were willing, it would take you in. You know, it was like joining the circus. Literally, you run away, you join the circus. It's the misfits, it's the carny folk. And I just up and moved to Los Angeles. I thought I'd work in the art department because that was my background. I was a woman. It was the late 80s. There was not a lot of opportunity for women in the there still isn't. And it was like, since I hadn't really planned to do it in the first place, it was like, well, okay, I'll be a costume designer. So I became a costume designer, and I worked my way up, you know, from films where budget was $900,000 and up and up and up and up, and then switched over to TV much later on. But there's as many stories of how people got into this business as there are people in this business.
Right.
Next.
So I never thought I would be in this business. I studied films by Edith Head, you know, just looking at, I was completely enamored by period films. My mom was a local fashion designer. I'm from DC, and it just wasn't attainable. At the time, in the 70s, you either lived in Los Angeles to be in the film industry or you weren't in the film industry, and so it wasn't an option for me at all. I went to New York to go to FIT to study fashion design and minored in design, actually, and majored in merchandising because I didn't want to be a fashion designer. I knew many people who were, and it just was not a business to get into for me.
So hard.
It was hard, but also you lose control of your designs and your business if you don't have the resources. So I, at the time when I moved to New York to go to FIT, my friend's aunt was an editor at Harper's Bazaar, and she left to go freelance as a stylist, and she said, would you guys like to work for me? I fired my 6th assistant because they won't follow instructions. And we said, my dearest friend and I said, yes! She said, you'll get fired if you don't do what I say. And we said, okay! And so that was the beginning. And so I worked as an assistant stylist with her, and then as a junior agent when she went on to become an agent representing stylists. And then I worked with the stylist that she represented. I moved back to the DC area when I conceived my oldest son because I didn't want to raise him in New York. And when I did, I actually entered into the film industry there, unbeknownst to me, because DC had a tax incentive, which a lot of states get tax incentives. And so when you have a tax incentive, you have to hire local crew. And I had the opportunity to work with some stellar costume designers who've won many Oscars, and they trained me. And because of my history and my skills from being in New York for 25 years, that gave me all the foundation that I needed. And then I began as a costumer, working just with background, and worked my way all the way up the ladder, key, costume supervisor, assistant costume designer, and then to design. And each time, the designers took me under their wing and said, okay, it's time for you to go to the next phase. I never raised my hand and said, I want to do what you're doing. I just did the best job that I could do that I was given, and they recognized it, and they escorted me to the next place. And so as a result, I too became a costume designer under the mentorship of some very famous designers who trained and raised me. And I've been doing that now for 3.5 decades.
And how many have you trained and raised behind
And
you?
I've trained and raised a multitude of designers that are also very
as we all
accomplished
have.
as well.
And Sal?
I just, I absolutely love it. I just couldn't, I've never done anything else.
I mean, I grew up in a small farm town. My father was a mechanic. There were 13,000 people in town. You couldn't get a Vogue magazine because they sent one to the town. I had in my freshman year in high school, a great college counselor, Gloria Helm, still remember her. And she's like, "What do you want to do with your life?" I'm like, "I want to be a fashion designer." She's like, "What are you doing to prepare for it?" I'm like, "I don't know." She's like, "Well," and this is back 40 years ago, they taught sewing in high school.
Yes.
So she put me in sewing, and I'm like, I take a sewing class, I'm a boy. And the teacher loved it, Nicole Mott Hansen, still a friend to this day. And I had 4 years of high school sewing, and then my senior year, FITM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in LA, had a caravan of teachers come through, and she's like, "There's a seminar, you should go to it." And they had a mannequin, and they had fabric, and she draped a dress on the dress form with like scissors and fabric, and I'm like, I want to do that. And I had watched Flashdance, and I was sort of aware of the idea that somebody had to do costumes. And I remember at the time, Love Boat was big, and Nola Miller did fabulous clothes, so I was aware of costume. I just didn't know that was a job. So I went to fashion school, and it was back then they didn't have a costume program, so it was like, let's make a dress. And since I could sew, in my first week, I finished it. And they're like, no, that's for the semester. I'm like, wait, no. And so after about a year, but I'm like, this isn't for me. And I sort of went off, and I went to beauty college because I was going to be a full-fledged homosexual and do makeup and costumes. And I hated makeup, but my skin looks good because I learned a lot. And I came back to LA, and I thought I was going to be a fashion designer. I was going to have a fashion line, and I could sew. And I was making gowns for clients and wedding dresses. And one of my bridal clients, Tracy Edmonds, was marrying Kenny Edmonds, and I had been on tour with Pebbles. And they liked the dress I made. She's like, "Will you design my wedding?" I'm like, "Sure." So I designed their wedding. And again, I'm building clothes for movies. And building the clothes for movies was just to have an income while I had my fashion line. And then Tracy, I was on Titanic, running the workroom on Titanic in Mexico City. And Tracy calls, and she's like, "We're producing this little movie called Soul Food. Do you want to design it?" I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of on this really big movie called Titanic." And so I went and met the director, and I had no portfolio because I'd never designed before. I had built before. And I took tear sheets from magazines, like, "Well, this is what I do for the characters," and they foolishly hired me. And then I went and prepped a shot and did this film. I thought, again, this is just till I have a design career. And then it just, like, the production designer on that show recommended me, and I went from a stitcher to a workroom supervisor to assistant costume designer, and then 20 years later, I was the 3-term president of the Costume Designers Guild, and I have 2 Emmy nominations. And it's funny because, like, on the Mindy project, I got to design contemporary clothes, and I actually did a coat line for Gilt, and I did a jewelry line for Blah Blah Blah. So I got to take all that energy of like wanting to design fashion and do it, and realize I prefer storytelling. Because in fashion, you have to do this. You're dealing with the public, and as a costume designer, it's like, no, this is a costume, and it really found me. And now I'm in the 32nd year of my career, and I've worked 75,000 hours.
There you go.
I can't believe
Well, we're out of time, but that's the perfect place to end it. So thank you so much for everybody and all your candor. And thank you for being. Of course, thank you.